الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد الحق أجمعين أبو القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى حبيبه الطيبين الطاهرين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, surely we have revealed to you the book with the truth, therefore serve Allah being sincere to Him in obedience. Today I want to talk about sincerity, or in Arabic, ikhlas. What does it mean to be sincere? There are two meanings when we talk about sincerity. The first one is that we are sincere in all our actions in life, especially in our religious worship towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It means to be deeply devoted to serving Him truthfully and purely in your heart. The second definition that we can give to sincerity means, in this context, to purging all of your actions and committing all of your actions without impurity. It means that the actions that you take must be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and you should not desire any reward in this life for the actions which you conduct. So who is a sincere person, if we follow these definitions? A sincere person is someone who distinguishes between right and wrong, who implements what has been determined in the Holy Quran, who doesn't see any limits in his closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his love for Him, and someone who completes all of the requirements of religion in an accurate and full manner. So, we establish then from this definition that sincerity is a type of attitude which we must have, and it appears only when we have fear for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as well as closeness to Him and love for Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives an example in the Holy Quran of a man who owns a garden. He has his own garden and he considers himself to be sincere, and he thinks that he deserves heaven even though he is in complete denial of the hereafter. So he enters into this garden and he did something wrong. He said, I do not think that this will ever end. I don't think that the day of judgment will ever come. But if I then should be sent back to my Lord, I will get something better in return. So he was arrogant in his heart. He wasn't looking after his garden in sincerity. So his garden was destroyed as a result of it. The lesson that you get from this story in the Holy Quran is that there was no one who came to aid him, no human being, no one. He wasn't given any help by anybody. The only protection that he was granted, and that any of us are granted, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. There's a story, you might have heard it, of a man who used to be seen in his community as one of the most pious and devout worshippers. He would go to the mosque every single day to pray in the congregation. He was always seen in the front row of the prayer line. But one day, he was late to Salah. So he came into the mosque late. And instead of going into the front row, it was full. So he joined the row at the back. And in that moment where he joined the salah at the back, where no one else could see him, he realized that he felt embarrassed that no one saw him at the front. He thought that that was his position. He belongs in the front row, so that everyone can see him and, wow, mashallah, he's the best. He's always... He realized in that moment that for 30 years of going to that mosque, and 30 years of doing that prayer, none of it was sincere and none of it was accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the consequence of that was that he had to redo 30 years worth of prayer alone so that he would not be caught by the disease in his heart of showing off to other people. When we talk about sincerity of our actions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran that He may try to see which of you is the fairest in works. Now, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam gave an explanation about what this verse means. He said that it doesn't mean those of you whose deeds are more numerous. It doesn't matter how many deeds you do, but it's how rightful and how correct you do them, and with the correct attitude. Imam al-Sadiq says, this righteousness is nothing but fear of God and sincerity of your niyyah, or your intention. He added on to that, if you persevere in this action until it becomes sincere, then this is more difficult than performing the action itself. And sincerity of action lies that you should not desire anyone to praise you for it except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And your intention is more important than the action itself. So, again, you can do the most actions, you can do the most prayers in front of everybody, but if it's not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's worthless. And the intention to do even the smallest of acts for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater than 30 years of worship that is insincere. The reality of sincerity is that sincerity must be from your intention, it must be from your action, and then, as Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq says, through your perseverance, the continuing of doing these actions. What's scary is that you can be sincere in your heart and you can do deeds for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you can still be punished for it. It doesn't seem to make sense, but Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam in Al-Kafi, he says that perseverance in an action is more difficult than the action itself. Someone came and asked him then, what does it mean to be perseverant in your actions? Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam said, a man might do some kindness to his family for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After this, he is then granted the reward of a good deed, and this good deed is written down for him. Later on though, he mentions that he carried out this deed to someone else. And therefore the original deed that was written for him, the good deed which he did in secret, is changed, and it's changed to a good deed which is done in public to be seen by others. It's acceptable, it's still a good deed, but it's not as good as the deed that is done in secret, where people don't see and recognize you. However, that same man later then mentioned it again, but this time he did it with the purpose of everyone knowing, and that original good deed which was written was then changed into the sin of Riyah. So even though he did originally this deed with the sincerity and he did it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then the disease of Riyah spread into his heart and he became proud of it, that good deed was written away and it turned into a sin, one of the biggest sins. So how do we be sincere? In Bihar al-Anwar, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had said that a servant can't reach the reality of Ikhlas until he doesn't like people to praise him for the actions he has done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This means that whenever you do something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it cannot be for the sake of others recognizing you. It can't be for the sake of getting praise from others for a good deed. We need to be of the mukhlisun. Those are the people who worship Allah in such a way that they don't see themselves in service of other people, nor do they take notice of the people around them when they do such deeds. Their actions belong totally towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I want to finish with a story from Sayyid Abbas idea which I heard, which scared me a lot and scared a lot of the people who I was with who listened to this story. He narrates that in Iran there was a famous mullah. He was really well known. He used to perform in a lot of the very big majalis, and people sought after him. They wanted him to read in their masjids because he's a very famous guy. Everyone wants to have someone like that reading in their masjids. One day he went to a marketplace to just buy some food, and an old lady, a really poor old lady, came up to him. And she said, Mullah, please, I have saved up all year to invite someone to read majalis in my house. I don't have a lot of money, I've saved up for so long. Her clothes are ripped, she's so poor. And he felt really bad for her. So he said, okay, I'll come and read the majlis in your house, but I won't take the money for it. So he went to the house. He expected, maybe 20, 30 people, some decorations in the house. He got to this lady's house, and it's one of the clay huts, very small. And inside there was only 4 or 5 very elderly women, no decorations on the wall. They didn't even have the money to afford a banner of Imam Hussein, I guess. So he was a bit shocked, and he said, okay, when are we going to go to the majlis? And she said, no, this is the majlis here. And he felt embarrassed. So he said, okay, I'll read it. And he read the majlis, And the elderly women were all very upset, but they were very grateful. So the old woman, she said to him at the end, please, now it's time for you to take the money. He said, no, I can't accept the money from you. You saved all your house is in this state. She insisted that he didn't take the money. So, in order to not break her heart and to make her more upset, he said, okay, I won't take the money. And then a couple of years after that, he died. His best friend, one day, only I think a week after he died, his best friend had a dream. And guess who came to him in his dream? This mullah. And he was really upset, his friend. And he said to his friend in the dream, you're in Barzakh now. What is your state in Barzakh? What is it like there? How are you being treated? And the mullah says to him, all the majalis I read in, all the salat I did, all the ibadah that I did, none of it was accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There was only one piece of worship that was accepted by him, and it's when I recited in the house of that old woman for the sake of her, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not to be seen by other people. This was the only worship that was accepted. So it's important then that whenever we are in the presence of other people, or even when we are alone, that any action that we do, any piece of worship that we do, is meant solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not to be seen by others, and not to gain recognition or to gain fame. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.